The much-awaited G20 summit to be held in India is just days away. The country is gearing up to host that mega event. And the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has said decisions made at the G20 summit will be pivotal for the world's future. In an interview to news agency Press Trust of India, the Indian Prime Minister added that no plan for the future of the planet can be successful without the representation and recognition of all voices. Prime Minister Modi has said India's G20 presidency also sowed seeds of confidence in countries of the so-called third world. Over the last few years, India has been positioning itself as a leading voice, flagging concerns, challenges and aspirations of the global south. Underlining the theme of the G20 presidency of One Earth, One Family, One Future, Prime Minister Modi said it guides the government's outlook within India and towards the world as well. Preparations and security drills are underway. A final decision on Africa's inclusion would be taken at the G20 summit to be held in New Delhi on the 9th and 10th of September. Meanwhile, the fourth G20 Sherpa meeting was kick-started in Haryana's Nuh district earlier today. The meeting will be held till the 7th of September and will see the participation of Sherpas and delegates from invited countries besides the G20 member countries. Preparation security drills have been underway. Leaders of over 40 nations are set to attend the summit, and India is not letting its guard down as far as the security preparations are concerned. About 130,000 security officers are set to be deployed for the two-day summit. During the weekend summit, New Delhi's borders will be closely guarded and access to the city will be regulated. The Indian military, including the Air Force, along with the Delhi police and paramilitary forces, will also deploy anti-drone systems to prevent any aerial threats. About 400 firefighters will also be on call. Security control rooms are being set up at the venue Bharat Mandapam, and special security arrangements have been made at key hotels like the ITC Maurya Hotel, where the dignitaries will be staying. And WION's Vikram Chandra spoke to India's Sherpa Amitabh Kant on the road ahead. Listen in.
There's going to be a Sherpa meeting first, right, from the 3rd, and then I guess that's when the final declarations will all be prepared before the summit. What's on the agenda for the next few days?
So, Vikram, for the last 15 days, we've been having virtual sessions with all the 20 plus 9 invitee countries and all the international organizations. We've discussed the draft. Now, it has to be discussed in person. We've had many challenging issues. Our draft is very ambitious. As the Prime Minister had wanted us to be ambitious, he wanted us to be very inclusive, which is what we have been. We've been very decisive and very forward-looking, and also very action-oriented. There are challenges. We are very hopeful of sorting them out, because when you're negotiating with 20 countries, G20 countries, the challenges of bringing in a consensus, and everybody has a veto power. Everybody has a veto power. And in multilateral discussions, the challenge is that you do not want, you try not to have a footnote. You try and bring everybody to the same level. That is what we've been attempting to do. We've been greatly successful, but hopefully we should see it through.
Well, presumably the biggest areas of remaining negotiation, where the biggest sticking points are going to be questions around Ukraine and geopolitics, and Russia and China seem to be dissociating a bit from what happened in Bali. So is that the biggest problem for you right now?
Well, that's a challenge. But let me first say that the Ukraine war is not our creation. It's for us, being the voice of the global south, to bring all the developmental issues up front, to be, as the Prime Minister said, very human-centric in our approach, and to focus on all our key priorities has been the primary aim. And all through the year in our ministerials, we have pushed all these issues up front. We have brought them center stage. And we've pushed the India narrative, we pushed the ambition, we've pushed all our key priorities. Those are important for us. Driving strong, sustainable, inclusive growth is the key task of G20. Driving sustainable development goals is the key task of G20. Driving, climate action and climate finance, and then ensuring that the multilateral financial institutions are able to provide adequate resources for both SDG and MDBs. The climate action should be, the resources must be able to come in from MDBs through new instruments of blended finance, credit guarantees, etc. And then digital transformation and the digital public infrastructure, which India has done enormously well at. And throughout the whole year, we evangelize that. And lastly, the Prime Minister's priority of women-led development, women's empowerment, gender equality, all that is key. So we've tried to bring all these issues center stage.
And for more on this and the G20 summit expectations, with us on the broadcast this minute is Ambassador Ashok Sajanhar, who is a former Indian diplomat with us from New Delhi. Thanks very much for being here on the broadcast. Let me begin by asking you for your comments on the expectations from the summit, and what do you see as the sticking points as far as the G20 discussions are concerned?
Yes, thank you very much, Molly, for having me on your show. So I think as far as the what the ambition would be to get a declaration, a New Delhi declaration, an ambitious declaration, an action-oriented declaration, inclusive declaration. These are the words that were used by the Prime Minister when he took over the mantle of G20 in Bali in last November. And we can see that since the presidency, G20 presidency, devolved upon India on the 1st of December last year, there has been hectic activity, frenetic activity. And I think all these elements we can have a look at, we can go through. The discussions have been inclusive because, India was able to organize this Voice of the Global South Summit right at the beginning, so that the concerns, anxieties, aspirations of developing countries could also be brought on board, and their voice could also be heard at the table. So I think definitely inclusivity has also been introduced by taking this, all the meetings, about 200 meetings to more than 60 cities within the country. So, this concept of Jan Bhagidari, that has been there. And I think across the board, whether it is the challenges that the world is facing today as a result, lingering impact of COVID-19, or the impact of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, the shortages of food, fertilizer, fuel, etc. So I think we have had discussion, and very ambitious agenda and decisions have been taken. But as Vikram was speaking to Sherpa Amitabh Kant, and he asked, this whole issue of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and how do you peg it? Where do you position it? Because you would recall that when the foreign minister meeting of the G20 was held, what External Affairs Minister at that time had said is that there is total agreement on all substantive issues dealing with development and growth. The only aspect on which there was no consensus was the issue of the political issue, not the economic impact of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, but the political issue of the Ukraine conflict. And I'm sure our negotiators at every level are burning the midnight oil, and that we would be able to see, a positive result and a positive outcome before the end of the summit on the 10th of September. Molly.
Right, and what about China? How do you assess Beijing's positioning and the message that it has been sending out ahead of the G20 summit?
I think China has been saying that it would support India's presidency and would do everything to make it successful. Now, I know, from whatever has appeared in the press, that there have been issues on which they have created some bottlenecks, some obstacles. For instance, the whole issue of the use of Devanagari script as far as the theme of the conference of this whole presidency, that is Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, is concerned. They've had objection on that also. But I think, as I mentioned at the foreign ministers meeting, also at the finance ministers and the central bank governors meeting, on substantive issues there has been by and large there has been agreement. Now, the fact that Mr. Xi Jinping might not be coming, we do not have a final confirmation one way or the other on that particular issue. But the fact that he might not be coming, I think it has both pros and cons. But I think it will be, in any case, even if Mr. Xi Jinping doesn't come, the Prime Minister is going to be there who's going to be representing China. So I'm sure China will be fully on board on all the major decisions taken, whether it is on climate finance, climate action, on debt relief, as far as the action by multilateral development banks is concerned, on supply chain disruptions. So I'm sure the Chinese ministers and senior officials have been participating actively in all the deliberations. So at the end of the day, I would not see whether Mr. Xi Jinping comes or he doesn't come. I don't see any issues as far as Chinese position on the substantive matters is concerned. Molly.
All right, we're leaving it there for the moment. Thanks very much for being here on the broadcast and sharing those perspectives.
Thank you. Thank you, Molly. Thank you.
And as India is gearing up for the G20 summit, we're taking a look at the origin and the significance of the 20-member bloc. Have a look at our next report to find out.
If there's one grouping which holds the key to the world's future, that's the group of 20, or G20 as we call it. The G20 grouping, which includes the EU and 19 biggest economies of the world, has played a huge role in global economic growth and stability. Some numbers on your screen reveal a lot about the G20. The bloc has had a 78% share in global growth in the last 10 years. The G20 countries comprise 85% of the world economy. And with big trading nations like China and the US in the bloc, the G20 constitutes 75% of the global trade. But the G20's journey to becoming a global force began quite differently. The year was 1999. The world was coming out of the Asian financial crisis, eagerly looking forward to the 21st century. The major world economies began to realize the need for collective economic action. This gave birth to G20, an informal grouping of finance ministers and central bank governors from the most industrialized and developing economies to discuss global economic and financial stability. But a major turning point in the G20 journey came in the aftermath of the global financial crisis, when it became clear that the global economic action can only be taken at a political level. Since 2008, top political leaders of the G20 have been meeting every year to discuss pressing issues of the world. In fact, the G20 bloc rose to prominence after providing strong leadership during the global economic crisis. 15 years later, India is hosting the annual summit for the first time. The times have changed, so have the priorities of the G20 bloc. The grouping now focuses on climate change, technological disruptions like cryptocurrency, sustainability, apart from the economy. The current G20 summit will take place amid multiple global developments that are having a major impact on the world. All eyes are now on India and its leadership of the G20 grouping. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the updates on the move.